Right now, we are moving to the topic of the utmost importance. We know that the crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic made for many of you the digital tools the only way to continue your daily lives and professional processes. The COVID-19 implications appeared many times in today's agenda, but the next format would be entirely dedicated to cybersecurity challenges that arise from this unprecedented situation. Let me introduce Rafał Rohozinski, CEO of the SecDev group and also member of the Cybersec 2020 program committee. Rafał, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and thank you very much, colleagues. It's, I think, a testament to just how digitally enabled our world has become, that given the COVID-19 crisis, we can go ahead and in fact have a forum such as this today. But I think it's also quite indicative and quite important to recognize that the COVID-19 crisis, and especially the massive movement of people online, represents maybe one of the big advantages that the digital world has brought, which means a continuity of institutions and social life despite a pandemic, but also has brought forward to the front of the pile some of the issues around basic cybersecurity and basic truths about the cyber environment that many of us who've been involved in cybersecurity have found so difficult to communicate to policymakers over the last decade and a half. So in this talk, I really want to speak about three things. The first is I want to talk a little bit about some of the ways in which COVID-19 has shown up cracks and perhaps insufficiencies in how we have managed the digital infrastructure overall. Secondly, I want to talk about some of the emerging cyber threats that have already been noted over the last 2 months of dealing with this global emergency. And thirdly, maybe give you a little bit of a perspective on some of the things that are already being done and some of the things that can be done, particularly between the partnership of cybersecurity industries and providers and governments in dealing with both capacity and insecurity issues online. So what are some of the issues that our current situation has brought to the light in terms of insufficiencies or gaps in how we've managed our digital infrastructure? The first is, I think, a clear understanding that telecommunications and internet resources need to be seen as a critical national asset, and as a result require a degree of both supranational as well as national coordination. This has probably come to the fore the most in the congestion problem that has been present on many national segments of the internet since populations have been sent home and told to stay home overall. As many of you are aware, streaming has become a pastime for those trapped in homes, which has strained network capacity in several countries, and in particular in segments, to the point where streaming services have had to degrade their services by 50% or more in order not to have the internet go down. In many cases, this is an issue which has, in less turbulent times, been dealt with by a market mechanism that allows providers to add capacity where it's needed based upon economic need. But it also points to the fact that we do need to have regulatory tools that would, in extraordinary circumstances, force providers to be able to share bandwidth and peering in ways that perhaps they wouldn't otherwise do. Secondly, there's the issue of the potential for failure. In some cases, we've seen that networks are starting to come under such stress locally that they are under the risk of simply falling over. This has been particularly evident in some municipal settings where municipalities have moved very quickly to put all of their critical services on IP networks. This includes the routing of emergency calls and other response mechanisms, only to find that under the increased load that local providers now find themselves, and absent of a resilience strategy, these systems are starting to slowly fall over. So the issue of addressing the potential for failure through regulatory means and resilience is something which, although has been talked about for years, is now coming under test. We've also seen new vulnerabilities emerge, and those that really have not been addressed, or rather not addressed at the scale at which they're needed now with the COVID-19 crisis. No business continuity plan, for example, ever envisioned that the entirety of an institution's workforce would suddenly have to work from home, and work from home not from devices that they've been issued by their organization, but any device that happens to be available and any network through which they can connect. VPN capacity in many cases has either not been available in order to secure communications for critical workers that have to work on internal systems, or simply does not scale. For those of you coming from a technical background, you will know that VPNs are very computationally heavy. And as a result, supporting large numbers of users against single resources very quickly starts to run up against physical limits. In one particular case that we're currently working on here in Canada, a large metropolitan center is trying to bring over 10,000 employees onto a unified platform using VPNs. At the moment, they've only managed to get up to 25% of that workforce on VPNs, but have already used more than 75% of their existing capability. So the problem of capacity to be able to support a workforce working from home through VPNs has become severely strained. Secondly, internal resources now have become exposed that previously used to be protected and accessed through well-defended networks. The problem of these networks now being accessed through endpoints which are not protected is something that cyber criminals, cyber spies, and others are starting to take advantage of, and will leave us with a cybersecurity headache well beyond the actual lockdowns that we are currently experiencing under the COVID-19 experience. The fact also that employees of institutions, whether they're governmental or corporate, are now starting to use devices which can be as small as their personal cell phones or personal PCs or laptops, means that securing these endpoints for those who need to work on systems that require defense is something which has not been anticipated, is not currently in place, and as a result leaves huge vulnerability to be exploited. And this brings me to the second part of my talk, which is what is actually being exploited. In all of the COVID-19 crisis, cyber criminals, cyber spies, and what you could call chaos agents, those who are simply there to wreak havoc, have taken full advantage of the situation. Ransomware has been employed against hospitals, healthcare providers, locking up patient files, research systems, and demanding money in order to have these released. There have been several hospitals that have already been hit in Europe, and numerous others that are under risk because of poor cybersecurity practices. Bitdefender, one of the leading AV providers, has noted an almost 500% increase in malware over the past month related to COVID-19. A lot of this malware is directed towards credential stealing. The ability to be able to grab credentials for lightly secured systems simply has created an unprecedented opportunity for those who wish to establish beachheads into otherwise well-defended networks by stealing prior personal identities and credentials that can be exploited now and well into the future. Malware deployments on unprotected or lightly defended devices have established bridges and beachheads that will be expected and used into the future. We've also experienced an incredible surge in misinformation and disinformation. There is a basic human instinct in crisis to want to communicate and to want to share information. But embedded malware in over 2,000 sites that have been identified to date easily spreads among ordinary people, just like the COVID-19 virus itself. Again, spreading malware that can be used to establish beachheads and steal credentials, and that will be a problem well into the future. Immediate steps need to be taken. The internet needs to be protected. Where national internet capacity is at risk, governments need to step in to ensure that telecommunications providers provide collaboration in order to manage an approach to more rational bandwidth allocation and ensure that the internet, at a very minimum, simply stays on. The malware risk also requires attention, and perhaps looking at measures such as DNS filtering or IP filtering at the backbone level may be the best way to automate the process of blocking and filtering the spread of computer viruses, command and control networks, in a way that simply is difficult at the ends of the network. This is a blunt but effective approach that takes into consideration that more than 90% of malware uses DNS for command and control, and websites are not reachable if their IPs and DNSs are blocked or removed. This obviously is a measure that has to be taken with great care because it does risk, as our previous panel noted at the end, a form of surveillance and control over the internet, which also would be unprecedented in democratic countries. It's also important that the cybersecurity industry be mobilized. Hospitals, municipalities, and critical infrastructure providers simply do not have the knowledge in many cases or the capability to simultaneously deal with the stresses of operating in a disconnected environment and at the same time managing cybersecurity when they themselves have little or no capacity or simply have not have a capacity to scale to the level of the problem itself. Creating coordination and clearinghouse mechanisms for cybersecurities that can match the capabilities of industry with those of needs of hospitals, municipalities, and other institutions is a priority. In Canada, working with the Canada Centre for Cybersecurity, we are standing up a COVID-19 cyber defense force specifically designed to assist government in making this industry collaboration possible. And finally, I think it would be unreasonable to expect that any institution would have had a business continuity plan that would be capable of anticipating the scale and scope of movement to home from work that we've seen under the COVID-19 crisis. But the crisis is a wake-up call. Our economy, our political system, institutions that matter, from municipalities to healthcare institutions to critical infrastructure providers, all of them are highly leveraged on digital technologies and digital communications. In crises like COVID-19, that dependence becomes apparent when people can't use any other means for coordinating and conducting their activities. Digital public safety needs to become an organic component of digital transformation and all of our digital policies. This means building infrastructure not just for efficiency, but for resilience. This means planning for institutions to operate as networks. And foremost, it means an investment into digital hygiene. Infrastructure and capacity can be addressed through money. Digital hygiene can only be accomplished through behavior change. The vast majority of insecurities currently faced under COVID-19 could be addressed through a well-informed and well-equipped citizenry and workforce that understands the importance of hygiene and can apply it wherever they're located, at home or at their workplace. Just like the awareness of basic public health and digital and hygiene is at the end of the day what will get us through COVID-19 crisis, digital hygiene will help prevent and ensure that we never have to face a digital public health emergency in cyberspace in the future. On that, thank you very much for your attention.